Well, hello, U.S. history students. We're back with another video on the Civil War. This is part 2, which will focus on the causes of the Civil War. This is a lot of information, and I am trying to simplify it as much as possible, but it really is important that we try to cover as much information as possible. So this video will be a little bit lengthy. Our essential question for today is, how did cultural, economic, and political differences contribute to the outbreak of the Civil War? By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify and explain the different factors that would lead to the Civil War. And we have a few key terms that we want to make sure that you go ahead and get down into your notes. We have Confederacy, Union, secede, sectionalism, tariff, and abolitionist. Go ahead and pause this video so that you can copy those definitions down into your journal. All right, now that we have our vocabulary finished, let's go ahead and jump into the different causes of the Civil War. I do want to make sure that you guys know that this is a simplified version of the events that took place that led to the Civil War. Okay. So cause number 1 has to do with the economic differences between the North and the South. We touched on this in part 1 of this series, but let's just go ahead and review. So the Northern region had an economy that was based on industry. That means that they made their money from different technology advancements and from manufacturing. In the South, the economy was based on agriculture. That means that they primarily made their money from growing cotton. Cotton had made the South a one-crop economy, and they used slave labor to be able to enhance their economy. Another difference between the northern region and the southern region economy is that the northern region wanted to have tariffs on imported goods. So goods that were coming from other countries, they wanted there to be a tax placed on those goods. Whereas the South did not want to have tariffs placed on those imported goods because they were so focused on growing cotton that a lot of their goods were imported and they would have had to pay those tariffs. And so this is actually an example of sectionalism. So as I stated before, the South did not want to pay these tariffs because they had imported goods and they didn't want to pay those high tariffs. So they did not support tariffs on imported goods. And so they were thinking in the best interest of their region and their region only, as well as the northern region. The northern region wanted to have tariffs on these imported goods because it would force people to buy American. They wanted people to buy goods that were produced and manufactured in American factories. And again, that's an example of sectionalism because they are only focusing on what would benefit their region and their region only. Okay, the second cause that would lead to the Civil War has to deal with states' rights. In the North, they wanted the federal government and the Constitution to be the supreme law or the top law across the nation. Whereas in the South, they did not want the federal government to interfere with state laws. They also wanted the ability to ignore federal laws that were being passed. For example, they did not want to abide by the tariff laws that we just discussed because they did not want to pay those tariffs. In addition to that, they wanted to be able to control laws regarding slavery. In addition to this, they wanted to use popular sovereignty as a way to have states admitted to the Union so that they could decide if that state would be a slave or a free state. That's going to take us into the third cause for the Civil War, and that has to do with the debate over slavery. And I do have a quick question for you guys. Why do you think the South wanted to keep slavery going? I'm going to give you a moment to answer that. If you said that the South wanted to keep slavery going because their economy depended on it, you would be absolutely correct. If slavery was abolished, then they would now have to pay people that were working for them, and that would decrease the amount of profits they would see. The interesting thing about this third cause is that the first two causes tie directly into the third cause. The issue of slavery was by far the greatest cause of the Civil War. All the other issues stem from the debate over slavery. So a key point of information is that anti-slavery literature, such as books, and the addition of new states escalated the debate over slavery. Some of the items that we're going to discuss is going to include the Compromise of 1850, which was used to try to solve land disputes, the Fugitive Slave Act, which ends up fueling the fire over slavery, and the abolitionist use of anti-slavery material, as you see in this picture right here of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was a book that sought to expose what slavery was like. The Compromise of 1850 was used to try to solve the issue of new states, if they were going to be a free state or if they were going to be a slave state. The Slave Act made it a crime to help runaway slaves, and it also allowed officials to arrest runaway slaves in free areas. Another issue that comes up over the issue of slavery is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So this is a law that allowed popular sovereignty to decide if a new territory would allow slavery. So this act is going to repeal the Compromise of 1850. This act ends up leading to pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups clashing in a battle, which is going to become known as Bleeding Kansas. If you would like to see a reenactment of what took place during Bleeding Kansas, I will have it located in the description box, or you can also click the link in the top corner of this video. The fourth cause for the Civil War is going to revolve around political divide. So political parties began to shift due to views on slavery. So at this point, there were two main political parties, and they were the Democrats and the Whigs, which often disagreed about economic policies. Northern Democrats often disagreed with Southern Democrats on various issues, including slavery. At this time, the Whigs began to decline and the Republican Party begins to form to oppose slavery. Another aspect of this political divide is regarding a Supreme Court case involving an enslaved African American whose name was Dred Scott. Dred Scott decided that he wanted to sue for his freedom, and his case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1857, that Supreme Court case became a landmark case, and it was known as Dred Scott versus Sanford. Dred Scott sued for his freedom, arguing that he had become free when he was living in a free territory. His owner had traveled with him to both free and slave states. And so Dred Scott believed that once he entered a free state, he should have been given his freedom. The Supreme Court ruled on March 6, 1857, that even though he lived in a free state, that did not entitle him to his freedom. In essence, the decision argued that as a slave, Dred Scott was not a citizen. So African Americans that were enslaved were not considered citizens at this time. And because he was not considered a citizen, he had no right to sue in a federal court. So this basically means that he was still considered to be the property of his owner, and he did not gain his freedom. This is going to outrage abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass. We will take a closer look at this case while you're doing your independent work. Adding on to the political divide is going to be the election of 1860. So Abraham Lincoln, who once ran for senator, is now going to be elected president, mainly by the northern states. He promised not to abolish slavery where it already existed, but would not let it expand to other places. The election of Abraham Lincoln to the presidency angered many southern states, and it ends up leading to 11 states within the South seceding from the Union and creating the Confederacy. Abraham Lincoln did not think that states should be able to secede whenever they were unhappy about something. He was quoted as saying, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. He wanted to find a way to unite the country. This is going to lead to one of the major wars that our country has ever seen. So that was a lot. I know it was a lot. But there are many events that would lead to the Civil War. These were just four of the general causes for the war. So my question for you as we close this video out is, which issue do you think served as the greatest reason for the Civil War? Well, that's all that I have for you guys. See you next time.